What's up, everybody?
Last Tuesday, Dana White went live on his Instagram and dropped some massive news, including 3 championship bouts between Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev, Merab Dvalishvili versus Corey Sandhagen, and Tom Aspinall versus Ciryl Gane. Not to mention a number 1 contendership fight between Jiri Prochazka and Khalil Roundtree Jr. And while we already covered those here on the channel and on the podcast episode, both on Spotify, Apple, and of course here on YouTube, there were 3 more fight announcements that came in over the course of the weekend that maybe slid through the cracks because of how massive those fights were earlier on in the week, and we're going to touch on those here right now in 3 different divisions across 3 different cards, all with massive implications involved. And first up is the co-main event for UFC 319 in less than a month's time at the United Center in Chicago, Illinois on August 16th. We know that the main event of that pay-per-view will be between Dricus du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev, a massive middleweight championship fight that had a co-main event slot open for quite a while now, and now we have the answers to it, and it will feature the undefeated number 6 ranked featherweight in the world, Lerone Murphy, welcoming in the Bellator veteran with a ton of hype and momentum around him, Aaron Pico. His UFC debut is official. It's been a long time coming for the 13-4 Aaron Pico to make his UFC debut because we learned earlier on in the year that he signed on the dotted line to join the promotion, and it was rumored for a very long time that he was supposed to take on the undefeated Movsar Evloev for his UFC debut. As a matter of fact, they were originally slated to fight at UFC Abu Dhabi this past weekend that was headlined by Robert Whittaker and Renier de Ridder in the middleweight division. And Aaron Pico will still be making his debut on a fight card headlined by big-time middleweights, this time the championship fight in the division, and he is even scheduled to take on another undefeated fighter. However, it is no longer Movsar Evloev, who was removed from their slated bout due to injury. In steps Lerone Murphy, and the fight has been moved to the co-main event of UFC 319. This is a very, very intriguing bout stylistically, and from a storyline perspective, it says a lot that the UFC believes in Pico so much that they were willing to put him in there against an undefeated Evloev, and even still are willing to put him in there against an undefeated Lerone Murphy, both of whom are ranked in the top 6 of the featherweight division. For Pico, he will make his UFC debut on the heels of a 3-fight win streak in the PFL and Bellator, with the last 2 coming via first-round knockout against Pedro Carvalho and his most recent fight against Henry Corrales, which was in February of 2024, so a 1.5 year long hiatus for Aaron Pico as he makes his first walk to the UFC octagon. And big ups to the 16-0 and 1 draw Lerone Murphy, who is taking this fight when he surely did not have to, putting his unbeaten record on the line and his number 6 ranking on the line as well against someone making their UFC debut. But as he posted on X, never shied away from a challenge. 3 weeks notice, no problem. Banger, let's go. And I can't disagree with anything he said there, and this is Lerone Murphy's opportunity to really shine in his biggest moment, considering it will be a co-main event of a big pay-per-view that's going to have a lot of eyeballs on it, thanks to Dricus du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev at the top of the bill. Lerone had a draw on his UFC debut back in September of 2019 at UFC 242, and since then has won 8 consecutive fights, none bigger than the last 3 in a row against Edson Barboza, Dan Ige, and Josh Emmett. 2 of those 3 in main events over the course of 25 minutes. The biggest thing holding back Lerone Murphy, and honestly the same can be said for Movsar Evloev, the 2 undefeated top 6 featherweights in the world right now, is that for Movsar, he has not had a single finish in the UFC, and for Lerone, only 2 of his 8 victories have been by way of stoppage, with 6 decisions. However, you reach a certain point in your career where you can no longer be denied, and that is where both of them find themselves. It's unfortunate that Movsar had to be pulled out due to injury, but Lerone Murphy is still getting a high-profile bout, and should he stop Aaron Pico in his UFC debut and the momentum and hype that he carries behind him, it will go leaps and bounds toward Lerone's future in this featherweight division, maybe even launching him closer to a title shot than he's ever been before. Secondly, we jump to the Noche UFC card taking place on September 13th at the Frostbank Center in San Antonio, Texas, as we will see 2 former strawweight title challengers square off against one another for the very first time, with seemingly title implications on the line here. It's the number 2 ranked Tatiana Suarez taking on the number 4 ranked Amanda Lemos. For Tatiana, she will enter this fight having lost her last outing to Zhang Weili for the strawweight championship at UFC 312 in February, which would also be the first loss of her entire professional career. Because prior to that, Tatiana was 10-0 with 7 wins under her belt in the UFC, including 3 victories over former champions Jessica Andrade, Carla Esparza, and Alexa Grasso. So now she will look to bounce back and right the ship for the first time ever in her professional career, get back into the win column, and still at the age of 34, right at the edge of that prime, hold her spot amongst the elite in the strawweight division and in the title discussions. And for Amanda Lemos, she also fell short to the champion Zhang Weili, but that came at UFC 292 in August of 2023, and since then Lemos has fought 3 times, having 2 wins and 1 loss. The victories over Mackenzie Dern and Yasmin Lucindo, and sandwiched in between was a loss to Virna Jandiroba, who is the #1 contender right now in this strawweight division, if you ask me. The problem for Virna, however, is that it seems more likely now than ever, based on this type of matchmaking from the UFC, that Valentina Shevchenko will be welcoming Zhang Weili up to the flyweight division for a super fight clash between champion versus champion. So we'll see what the UFC decides to do with Virna Jandiroba, but we obviously see here what they decided to do with these 2 former title challengers, Tatiana Suarez and Amanda Lemos, both looking to keep their names relevant at a very important time for the strawweight division, where there are a lot of question marks regarding the championship at the top in Zhang Weili. And lastly is a big one in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada at UFC Fight Night Vancouver on October 18th at the Rogers Arena. We will see the #2 ranked Manon Fiorot making her return from her title fight loss to Valentina Shevchenko at UFC 315, and she will be taking on the #5 ranked surging Jasmine Jasudavicius in her home country. For Manon Fiorot, we saw her lose that decision to Valentina Shevchenko at UFC 315 in what was the first successful title defense for Valentina's second reign at the top of the flyweight division as the champion. But before that, Manon was 7-0 in the UFC with an absolutely insane resume, including wins over Erin Blanchfield, Rose Namajunas, Caitlin Sermonara, Jennifer Maia, Mayra Bueno Silva, and Tabitha Ricci. And now she will have a chance to add another name to her already stacked resume and get back into the win column and remain in title contention. But it is absolutely not an easy task, because Jasmine Jasudavicius may just be the hottest fighter in the flyweight division right now, or at least tied with Natalia Silva, both of whom are absolutely on a tear. For Jasmine, she has won 5 fights in a row, none bigger than her victory and stoppage on the very same night that Manon Fiorot lost in that championship fight to Valentina Shevchenko, because Jasmine got a victory over former champion Jessica Andrade and submitted her 2 minutes and 40 seconds into the first round. She has not lost a fight since September of 2023 against Tracy Cortez, and at 36 years old, she realizes that time is no longer on her side, and she is trying to be as active as possible, get the biggest names possible, and launch herself into title contention, and this is exactly the step to do so, because if she beats Manon Fiorot, she will absolutely be a #1 contender. However, similar with the fight we just talked about at Noche UFC, the title picture at flyweight is a little complicated right now, because it's up in the air if we are going to see Valentina take on Zhang Weili in a super fight or take on another flyweight contender such as Natalia Silva. But I'm just operating under the assumption that we are going to see Zhang Weili versus Valentina, and since this fight got made between Jasmine and Manon, #2 versus #5, we might as well go ahead and make Erin Blanchfield versus Natalia Silva as well, and then everything will be all smooth and dandy. But I want to get your thoughts on these 3 fight announcements down in the comments below, and give me your early predictions as well. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new, because I am always giving my thoughts and opinions on fight announcements such as these and other MMA news stories, as well as previewing and breaking down the biggest and best fights heading into each weekend and recapping the most meaningful results in the aftermath. You can also join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, as well as like the Facebook page Verbal Sparring MMA, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release there. Have a great week, and I will see you all in the next video.